Welcome back to Chris in Retro. On this show, we make sure that we take a look retrospectively through my journey and those of my guests at high-risk living and recognizing the unintended consequences that often comes with that. At the same time, we realize that there is hope. And no matter what happens in your life, there are seasons when you need to see hope and it's available to you. And through our conversations here, we want to demonstrate that all is not lost even when you're there. You know, we have seasons in life where things are uncertain. We've all been there. We have limited tools. We certainly don't have prophetic gifts. We'd love to. We'd love to be able to see the future and make predictable moves. We don't always have those to see what the outcomes are. Progress, many times, is our best guide. We see this in personal struggle. We see it in business ventures, professional ventures, through our innovation, those types of things. My guest today has known personal struggle. She's also known the uncertainties of navigating high-performing businesses, dreams, aspirations, and goals. She's an author, a life coach, entrepreneur, journalist, socialite, and I use socialite in quotes on my notes because she's definitely more social than I am. Not quite a Kardashian level, but definitely out and about in a significant way. She's a Shatterproof ambassador, a fellow Shatterproof ambassador, and we'll get into that a little bit. That's where we met. Shatterproof is a national nonprofit that deals with stigma, evidence-based treatment, and mental health issues. She's got a lot going on. But she took the time to be on the show here today. I'm thankful for it. Welcome to the show, Jen Sugermeyer.
Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate you.
No, I'm thankful you're here. You certainly had a lot going on. Big event for you. You had a birthday yesterday. So we were just talking a little bit about that.
I did. Yeah. So I'm kicking off this next decade here on your show. So I'm actually really looking forward to it.
What could go wrong, right?
Yeah. You know, and I will say just on that I really got clear about, what do I want this decade to look like and its impact. And so I think this is the perfect place to start, of impact. So thanks for having me.
Well, I'm thankful you're here. You and I met through mutual acquaintance with Shatterproof, Lynn Nouvelle. You were working on a documentary. We're both ambassadors doing that work, and both of us been pretty active in the organization. And I get a call that somebody named Jen is working on a documentary and is picking people's brains, and that's how we met. So that documentary was a couple of years ago. It's probably been, 2.5 years ago now?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. Yep. So what was that all about, and how's that going?
Yeah. So I had this idea because we have so much just misinformation, I believe, in society. I just, I'm in the sober community. I'm, as of this documentary, I'm 5 years sober. And, I have so much fun in my life as it stands today. I really enjoy who I am and who I've become. And I meet people and sometimes they'll say, "What, you don't drink?" And the first thing they'll say is, "Well, that's lame." And so I think there's just so much misinformation out there and people don't feel empowered not to drink. And so the documentary was really about, let's just put all the information out there and show people what, the cause and effect of drinking. And I'm, not for it or against it. I certainly can't do it myself, but just put the information out there. So it was a lot of fact finding. And so that's how we got in touch. Yeah.
I appreciate your position on that too, because I'm really not opposed to other people's alcohol consumption because I really don't know what their relationship is with it. It's really not a platform I stand on. I just know for me, I'm a hot mess. I need to stay away from it. If I for whatever reason, when I touch it, I can burn down any village I'm in. So, but I do think that you present that notion that life can go on, and you are a very social person. I mean, it's at least from what my observations are. So it's impressive.
Yeah. It's, I actually feel more comfortable in my skin now. I think I go out and I have more fun and and I'm going to use this term loosely, party harder. And I just mean that I can dance without fear or reservation. I'm not afraid of, saying something stupid or doing something stupid. I can be who I am in my own skin. And so I think not having that fear of what is alcohol going to do to the Jen and the alcohol, and it just doesn't mix well. And I know what would have happened. And now I don't worry about that. So it's a lot more fun now, I think, than ever when I drank.
Right.
So.
I could see that. I think that one thing about my sober journey that's given me is some authenticity. I think we all say that we're honest and true and whatever else, but man, I was a different person with alcohol. I can say that, and I actually have this. If you look at my LinkedIn profile and how my bio is set up, I get to be Chris everywhere. So I get to be the same Chris I am at home as I do in a professional setting, as I do on this show. what a relief, because I mean, there's so many different masks we wear.
Yeah. And it's exhausting to keep up different facades, because I was in the corporate, I was leading global teams for billion-dollar companies and reporting to the chief information officer, and, in many respects was doing well in my career. And it was exhausting having multiple faces. And it is so nice to just have one. So I absolutely resonate with that.
Sounds good. And your message is consistent too, even on the social media platforms that you have. I mean, I would say, I don't like using the word vulnerable because I think it's so cliche these days, but it is real. You show the world that you operate like everybody else does. And I think it's a good look for you in terms of how you carry yourself along with the message that you carry. It wasn't, you and I we don't know each other that well yet. We've had brief conversations, but we had an initial conversation getting ready for the show, and you talked a little bit. I was kind of surprised. My view of you is pretty put together. Yeah, maybe alcohol had a season in life that wasn't the best, but you like music and that type of thing, so that can always coexist. But I was surprised that you had some struggles too, and some things you were talking about. But I guess generally speaking, for my audience to get to know who you are, could you tell us, a little bit about what it was like growing up, Jen?
It's interesting, and I'm going to start here. I'm 6'1", and I think that is one of the most incredible things about me. And also, when I was a child, it was also very challenging. So I am pre-WNBA age, which means I just dated myself, right? Although I guess I launched with, this is the day after my 40th birthday. So there you go. But this was pre-WNBA days. This was pre-internet days. I didn't know where anybody was that looked like me. And when you're a kid, you just want to fit in. You want to shop at the same cool stores, and you want to look the same, whatever. And that's what kids gravitate towards. And if you are outside of that box, and it doesn't matter if it's how you look, or if you have a interesting last name, or if you like something outside of whatever it is, kids are going to find some way to pick on you. And my height was that thing. And it was very difficult for me. And so I always struggled with that. But in terms of my household growing up, there was nothing out of the norm, right? I mean, it was the typical American lifestyle, two kids and a white picket fence, parents were married, kind of, two cats. It was just middle-class America. There was nothing outside of the norm. There was no red flags anywhere in my family. And Christian conservative, that's how I grew up. And so, outside of struggling with some bullying and things like that, my life was pretty normal, I would say. Yeah.
We share some of that. And one of the things I've professed on this show and other interviews and things I've done is that there was really no reason for life to go sideways for me. I mean, my parents are still married. And they, honestly, they're the embodiment of till death do us part. Life does not get easier as you get older, and they're just tremendously loyal to each other. And that level of loyalty is just something you don't see today. So I grew up in not a broken home. I grew up in a home that was Christian conservative as well. They still live in the same 600 square foot house I grew up in Western New York. So it's like, there's this consistency and stability. There was nothing that would represent a problem. My dad was good with me, played catch with me, taught me to play baseball. My mom was fair with us. 5 boy cousins around. My family was around. There's really no reason why this should happen. We all think differently. And I think some of the things that you profess is how you're thinking, how you reframe your thinking, how you address things. And regardless of I think that we glorify in the recovery community for sure. You have to have grown up in the hood. You have to have come up in some just massively disadvantaged population for you to have any credibility, when in fact what you're describing is a challenge, that's every bit as, damaging to you. So, how did you address that?
Yeah, this was, and I think this is, I'd like to start with this point. Back in 2014, so I'm still drinking. I didn't get sober till 2018, but 2014, I was here in Dallas, Texas, and I was just broken. I was just broken and desperate. And I found myself at this eating disorder group. And I sat around, and it's very much the sit in a group and, say your name. And it's kind of in the same format that these, AA or NA or any of these. And so we're going around the group, and it gets to me, and I just start sobbing. And they said, so I don't even have words. And I said, finally, like when I came up for air, I said, I don't even know why I'm here. I don't know if I should be here, if I should be at AA, if I should be with a therapist. But when I look back at all my problems, this is where they started. And I think my subconscious knew all along what took me then 4 more years plus to figure out. You see, back when I was 12, I had an eating disorder that started my entire teenage years. And I struggled with that throughout the years. What I didn't understand at the time. You see, I was tall and a little bit bigger. And I thought, no guy is ever going to want me for being tall and bigger. And I couldn't figure out how to get shorter. And so I figured out how to get skinnier. And so I didn't understand that I was putting a wedge in between me and my self-love, that I had put kind of like a stake in the ground and said, you are not good enough, Jen. And the only way that you're going to achieve that is this. And so I started playing these kind of mental games with myself all throughout the years that I was never good enough and I was never this enough. And I just suffer from the not enough syndrome. And I struggled with that for so many years. And what I didn't understand is this little benign little eating disorder thing that I was dealing with, which was actually got to be pretty severe. That I actually was fueling my addiction because I had started messing with my reward system. So then I just went from, eating disorder to alcohol and struggled with that for, decades. So addiction of some capacity. So I think that's a really important part of the story as well, because it's where I can pinpoint, what really happened. And what I talk about in my messaging a lot is we need to learn to accept who we are. And when we do, we are able to get through anything. But the thing is, we've just disconnected from ourselves on so many levels. We are all running through life so quickly. And it's so easy to just supplement things with, oh man, I don't want to deal with this situation. I'll just drink. Or I don't want to deal with this. I'm just going to go gamble. I don't want to deal with this. So I'm going to go have sex. I'm going to go whatever it is that fills that void. And so for me, how did I deal with this? My life, I was moving on this path of, things were going really well. I was working in Afghanistan with a top secret clearance because I contracted with the government for a while. I was moving up in my career, but I was fueling this addiction that I didn't even understand that that's what was happening. I kept feeding it. And my life was falling apart. I kept going in and out of jails and hospitals. And I've practiced for speeches for the CEO in jail. Like when you talk about unmanageability, that's really not a sustainable lifestyle. I hope I can get out and find my truck so I can make it into the office and land this speech, nail the speech I just practiced for. Right. Mm-hmm. So things were really unmanageable until I was able to really connect with myself. So that was kind of at a high level. I don't know if there was anything that you wanted to dig into.
No, that there, honestly is directly in line with where I was hoping to go with this, because, my next thought was, how much do you see self-image mattering at all? It was my next question, actually. And you're literally playing right into that it's not even so much about how, I guess I'll step back for a second. You said we need to learn to accept who we are. And I find that interesting because there was a piece that you didn't tell that you didn't talk about how you were even trying to deal with your own height. Like you were researching how to fix the height problem. And then you obviously the weight problem you felt that you could address on your own. And so you went and addressed it on your own in a harmful way. When you started, it sounds like when you learned to accept yourself as you are, that's when you actually started connecting with other people that probably had healthier advice for you. I mean, when I hear about somebody in 2014 going into a room and breaking down, for me, when I went into a room, and I'm not preaching AA, I actually just happen to be in an AA room, but wherever you go that you decide to allow another influence to influence your thinking versus yourself, you break down. You have that moment of like, I can't do this anymore. I've never really drawn that connection. There is a balance between not being the one that's the solution all the time, but also learning to accept the fact this is who I am. Doesn't always have to be this way. There's a possibility for improvement in me. I don't have to just settle, but I also don't have to destroy myself because I'm unhappy.
Yeah. Yeah. And so my sober date is May 13th, 2018. And the moment that happened, I actually was gifted 7 words that came from the gentleman that I was dating. And I had a lot of terrible dating experiences. I was, divorced by the time I was 30. I mean, things really were just not great in my life. And because I didn't value myself, I found a lot of other people that didn't value me as well. And so really my dating life was a disaster, but I realized I, needed to change the kind of guy that I was going after. So I found one that didn't drink, and I thought, that would help me, right? Like, I'm going to get in a relationship. I always did the if then, like, if I get a promotion, then I'll be happy and I'll stop drinking, right? Like, if this happens,
he doesn't drink,
if
but
I
he's a
get in a
serial
relationship, yeah, right. Yeah. And, if I get in a relationship, and I think women especially do this, if I get in a relationship, then I'm going to be happy and it's going to solve all my problems. Didn't solve any of my problems. And he was such a great guy. And about 4 months in, on May 13th, 2018, he told me the 7 words that changed my entire life. And they were this. He said, Jen, you need to learn to love yourself. And, the funny thing, I actually thought I was hiding things from him. I thought he didn't see my drinking because we didn't hang out so much during the week because we're so busy with our jobs, right? And I thought, he wouldn't see the anger. He wouldn't see the anxiety that I had. He wouldn't see all the I'm not good enough stuff that was going on inside. He saw right through all of it. And it's funny, I used to videotape myself like on the way to work every morning and send him like a little 2-minute video like, hey, good morning. And I went back and I watched those and I was like, I was toxic. And I didn't think I was, but I would be like, hey, good morning. How are you? And then somebody would cut me off and I'd be like, asshole, like something really evil would come out of me. And I'm like, he saw all the broken. And so I just, as much as we think that what's happening on the inside won't show on the outside, it absolutely does.
It sure does.
And it will impact those relationships, those close relationships that you have. And I found it so profound that this gentleman that I thought, well, he doesn't drink. And, and I drank a little bit around him, and he saw some not great things, but I tried not to drink around him, but he saw the brokenness and he was so right. I needed to learn to love myself. And that was the key to everything. And when I learned to accept who I was or who I am, the world actually accepts me more. I'm not fighting anything, right. There's been this like shift of, I'm not fighting myself and trying to justify who I am. Like, this is who I am. If you don't like it, that's okay.
Right.
I like me. That's what it all came down to. But
it's a healthier fight. So I co-sign, fighting for what you believe in. I mean, I was an amateur fighter. I mean, I've competed. These are all things that I co-sign. I mean, see you working on your bag and stuff, in your videos and things. I'm like, that's good. It's good that you're getting out there doing that. I feel like the fighting thing for me, at least what was unhealthy for me around that whole construct, is that I felt like I was taking care of business because I was standing for something and I was willing to fight and nobody's going to cross me and I'm going to deal with this whole thing. And when the fact is, I really wasn't doing anything of substance. I was having a momentary flash in the pan way of dealing with a situation. And when it's all said and done, I'm still a mess. You were describing those videos. I can feel moments when I was very similar, not sending, videos like that in the morning, but you're only so skin deep with that loving emotion. And then immediately the other anger and turmoil is going to just come flying out. And that's the real meat of it. And so if you've got somebody that isn't around alcohol for whatever his personal reasons were, he may have been exposed to that behavior in his past life in other capacities and saw it. It's pretty evident. You don't really have to be an expert to see it. It is curious to me that you were, those are some of the things you struggled with. Especially to me, you embody one of the things that I try to say to people. How many people do you know in corporate life right now that are struggling with addiction? But everything's going well for them. They got the accolades, they got the awards. Optically, everything looks good. They got the family, the nice house, everything. And one of the things I talk about in the show, as I said at the beginning, is that when we're living those high-risk lives, total collapse is a lot closer than we think it is. We think we're being slick, but it's there. It's 100% there. And that's what happened for me in my life. It sounds to me like you were rolling the dice pretty good too if you're doing presentations while you're in jail. We're only so slick and then everything just falls apart. And you're evidence of what happens when you recognize that, accept yourself for who you are and get moving forward. So I appreciate that part of your story for sure. So you, this childhood, personalities and behaviors sounds like there are things that have helped you be successful as an adult and to work through your addiction. Is that fair to say? That was some of the ways that you dealt with your childhood, eating disorders and how you approached height and how you dealt with your own self-image that helped you move beyond your recovery or move into your stage of recovery, or at least your relationship with alcohol?
Yeah. I mean, I think that was all part of it. It was, I had to learn to have a relationship with myself. And, I told myself, because I had been, I don't, I've been to enough AA to know some of what they stand on. And I think there's a lot of value there. And they'll tell you, don't date for a year, don't do anything big for a year, after you get sober. And so that was exactly what I decided to do. I said, no big changes. I was going to stay with my job. I wasn't going to move because I will jump at things like this is going to solve my solution. And I'm like, no, Jen, you need to stay right where you're at. Don't try to get into a relationship. Don't change anything. And what's funny is after a year, everything had changed, but nothing had changed because I had changed. Right. And so my whole journey that year was to get to know me. And I had to uncover why did I get angry about things? So all those things that you talked about, like that would just creep up. I knew that stuff existed. I knew that when I drove, because I drive big trucks and I feel like there's this ownership to keep people in line on the road. I don't know why I feel that way. I'm like, oh no, you can't be cutting people off. I'm going to make sure you don't. Right. So that's not good. That's not my job. Yeah. And it gives me anxiety. And, if you tail me too close, I'm going to slow down and teach you a lesson. Right. Yep. Like those angry things that we don't need to do. And I had to learn to get past those. And so it was a very methodical approach during that year that I actually started to, and I said the serenity prayer a million times until I actually understood that we need to let go of things that we cannot control and control the things that we can. And that I literally probably said it 287 times before I actually understood it. And so that year was only learning who I am, getting rid of negativity and focusing on who is the person that I want to be. And it was the coolest. It was actually a really fun experience to do that with myself. And I picked up hobbies and, just to keep me busy. And I loved it. Yeah.
Sometimes seeing things through a different lens makes a huge difference in our lives. Yeah. I'll promise, if I'm ever in the Texas area, I will not get in front of your truck. It sounds like you're pretty aggressive.
Yeah. No, I'm actually super calm now. I drive in the right lane. I'm like really calm.
You talked about the serenity prayer, and that resonated with me really early on. And the reason it did is because I was able to, through some help, understand what my 3 triggers were. And it's really controlling behavior, procrastination, and fear. So, and it works, and it's kind of a cycle for me. So I need to be in control of what's going on around me, especially if I feel like in relationships and things like that. So if I'm getting afraid of, where this is creeping, I'm going to try to control it. You can't control many things and most things. And so, but I try to control them more, and my fear would grow as I'm seeing evidence that I'm not in control of any of it. And I'm losing control of me because I'm not my focus now. Now I'm taking inventory of every single thing around me, and I'm taking no business with my own. Then it becomes overwhelming. And at that point, I start procrastinating, dealing with a lot of the other things. And I become so laser focused on the thing I'm trying to control that I never had any business to control in the first place. That's when the alcohol comes in, because it's just too much. And so I need to hide. And it was an amazing hiding place until I kept waking up with more criminal charges and more, problems and damaged stuff. And, for my story, it led to homelessness in 2017 and sleeping on a backpack in a Western New York winter in a cemetery, and coming from having 13 leadership awards, at 10 of those with Johnson & Johnson, to a backpack in a cemetery. It can happen. I mean, collapse happens, and it all happens with these behaviors too. It's not the alcohol. It was what brought me to that place that alcohol had to be the only option for me, and it had to be the love of my life. So we all have stories. Yours, it sounds like it was a protracted season, but I'm curious, one of the things that we learned early on is our healing comes from what we give away too. And so I'm curious how much of that played into your path, if it did at all, in terms of helping other people.
Yeah, well, I absolutely agree. I think the teacher learns the most. And, it's one of the reasons I wanted to write a book. And I've written 3 books now, and it helps you get really clear on what is your position when you are writing it down or when you're teaching someone else. I remember, just side note, I lived in Italy one time and I was teaching English, or they brought me over as an au pair to teach English. And boy, that was a lot harder than I had ever imagined. Like, I know nothing about the English language to teach it, right? I mean, I'm like, well, this is so much, but like, you really have to know your stuff. It's one thing to just speak it, but you have to know what is your position. You need to know how to help people navigate through. And once you do, then you become really clear on your position. So the teacher is always going to learn the most. And so for me, that's one of the main reasons why I wanted to write these books, because I wanted to be so clear on these topics and really become the expert in them. And so, so I've also done coaching as well. And that has been extremely fulfilling. Watching light bulbs go off for other people. And not just during the session, but to come back and say, I applied this and it worked. I worked through the steps that we walked through. And so there's a level of gratification as well. But it's always the teacher is going to learn more. So I absolutely agree with that sentiment.
There's a power in that. You actually, for me, I felt valueless for a long time. And so when some of these, this pain that brought me a pathway to peace, in sharing my journey, if you want what I have and go to any length to get it, this is how I got here. You don't have to follow my journey. There's a strong spiritual component. I 100% believe in a God, one. And I also believe in the steps in the process that I went through. And I also believe in progress and work. I believe this is a full contact sport. It's not something you just sit around and talk about. You got to get in it and make it work. But when I see other people even apply some seed of it, and you see some progress and traction, it's tremendously encouraging, because it validates that I'm not completely insane still. Some of this stuff is actually authentic, and I'm not, one step away from burning back down. You do this coaching, and it's kind of where I was headed with this is, you're coaching people, and you made that part of your journey, part of your professional journey has been in coaching. Are you seeing things where, we're in a world right now where people are struggling, period. No matter what time you turn on the TV, you're going to find some calamity or some, fear, something we should be afraid of or whatever. In your client base and those you talk to, do you see like a general theme of what people are struggling with? Is there things that are more common than others as you're, supporting people's lives that way?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, we do know, I will say, coming out of COVID, that 40% of people have poor mental health. We went from 20 to 25 to 40, right? So almost every other person you're looking at is struggling with something.
And it's even worse in the youth. In the adolescent population, it's even worse.
Yeah. And that's a whole nother, and I think we could go down a rabbit hole there. I think my heart has really opened up to those children, especially assessing my own journey and how I didn't accept who I was, and just a lot of the things that are changing. I don't have kids myself, but I feel very close to what's happening out there. But, I think it's just the instability of, I see, there's so much fluctuation that's going on. We're kind of stabilizing a little bit, but inflation's still going up, and, it's just the cost of everything. And life is, the housing market, I don't know how it is where you are, but the housing market is so expensive. It's getting so expensive compared to what it was. Now, maybe not compared to California and New York crisis, but compared to what it was 10 years ago, local Texans really, it's almost doubled. So it's become very expensive. And so that's just a lot of the things that we struggle with here. It's just life. I think that's being thrown at you, and how do you manage all the things?
So how do you help people that are, I don't mean to be disrespectful to them, but casually participating in a journey? I think one of the blessings that we have in recovery is we have to immerse ourselves in it. You just can't dabble in it. You have to be it. In that journey, all in. Like you said, you even isolated yourself from relationships and things like that for a year to make sure you understood and engaged. But I think that when we casually feel like we've got a problem and we sort of go talk to somebody through it, we're not completely immersed in the whole process. I'm just curious, what works for people? What are you seeing help them?
Yeah. So I'm going to start with the Zig Ziglar quote, who said, if you aim at nothing, you hit your target every time. And so if we are not clear about where we are going, then yeah, what are we doing? What are we just casually going through life? And so I think it's really important. Yeah, it's good to know where we came from and it's good to know the past, but there's nothing we can do to change the past. We need to baseline our life today and where do we want to go? Mm-hmm. And so when you can have that foundation, again, there's stuff, fine. You don't want to repeat the past, or maybe you want to look back just to see how far you've come, but there is no sense in lamenting on any of the past. So let's baseline the future. Let's baseline where we're at. And where do you want to be in the future? And how do we get there? And it's different for everyone. But having that level of clarity is going to help give you that roadmap, and getting clear on what is your why? What is your purpose? Who are you? And if you don't have that target, then yeah, you're going to hit that every time. And so it's figuring out those things and landing on those and then moving forward. And, my definition of success and your definition of success are both success, but entirely different, right? Like you might define it monetarily. Other people may define it, in other means, having a family or being a mom or whatever it may be. There's just so many different definitions of things.
But it is defined.
Only you can define those.
Right.
Yeah, only you can define those.
So there's been a couple of things that since you've been talking that really, I'm like, man, I agree. Like the core of me, I agree. And what you were just describing is the most so far that you've said that I can say I'm 100% aligned with you on. And there was a couple elements there that really just kind of sprung for me. One was your thought about focusing on history. There's a couple elements of that are important to me. One is I can recognize there was a history that I don't want to repeat. Mm-hmm. But like a road, it doesn't do me any good to sit back and analyze the potholes that have happened. It just, what do I do to make sure the road doesn't continue to be damaged going forward? So that, for me, I need to know it's there. I need to know my tendencies. I know that alcohol is not my friend. Those are beneficial things. But if I spend every minute of every time that I'm trying to improve talking about that history, what am I doing? I'm living there still. I'm immersing myself in there. And so for me, that matters. The other thing I believe in when we get into sessions or group sessions or conversations or whatever else, the more we're talking about our history versus our progress, we're just getting in piss and matches. So if I'm saying, okay, well, I'm a convicted felon, and somebody else goes, oh yeah, well, I'm a felon, plus I, murdered 7 people. We're just constantly in this like glorifying what happened in our worst possible time. I would rather talk about the hope and help I found from certain people that introduced to themselves in my life. Sure. That engaging at times when I didn't want to helped lead me to new days. Being willing to have conversations with you about documentaries that didn't exist. So I met somebody named Jen that would be encouraging in those moments when we're going through a particular season. So those things I think are more important for the journey. But the most important thing that you said that mattered to me was this notion of naming your goal. It's not just saying you have goals, but you have to declare it. And I think by declaring it, I now know what you're shooting for. I can say, I'm thinking about, she's working on this. I got this person I wanted to talk to. That's how it works, is we then as a community come together and help each other out. And we can't do it if we're just sit back on, man, I hope life gets better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What does that mean? Because better to you, you have to define it.
Or it must be nice.
Otherwise it's just, there's so many different definitions. So,
So I just felt that was kind of one of those ones where you almost got an amen out of me halfway through this. So.
All right. Well, feel free. Let it out.
So when you are doing, discussing coaching people and things like that, there's been times when they have not done well. There's probably advice you've given them that you thought might have matched up well because it worked out well for your life. Has there been an example where, it worked for you, but it might not be working for other people and you've advised them to go that path? Has there been anything like that?
So I'm going to say no, because maybe, okay. I don't want to say that there was 100% success on all the things. My first reaction to that was I try not to advise, right? It's more question based and let people create their own path. I'm not sitting here telling you how to live your life or what's your definitions or whatnot. Sometimes I may ask permission and give a suggestion or things like that. But if we don't take ownership and it's, oh, well, she made me do this or he made me do that, well, he said I should, then there's not that ownership. It's kind of that same principle of if you give somebody something for free versus if they pay for it. Like if they pay for it, there's ownership, right? They're like, oh, I paid for this, I'm going to make sure that I use it, versus, well, somebody gave it for me for free, so I don't really care, right? They need to have that level. So that was my first reaction, was I'm trying not to give advice. What I do and how I facilitate my coaching is there's actually videos that go along with it. And I talk about different ideas and principles. And so we talk about what is control so that you can start to identify it. What is failure? And we talk about how, failure doesn't exist. Talk about choice. Choice is huge. That's the first thing we start with, choice and control. I mean, everything is a choice that you have. And so many times we don't think that we have choices in life. Even when you get laid off, you have a choice. Well, but Jen, I didn't ask to get laid off. What do you mean I have a choice? You have a choice in what you do next, right? There's nothing we can do about the past. Mm-hmm. So it's really my approach to coaching is let's set some of those foundational mindset, just the infrastructure in your mind, just some ideas that you can start to throw around. And then as you're navigating through your life and your challenges, and what can you start to grab on? Oh my gosh, hold on. That wasn't a failure. That was a lesson learned, because failure doesn't exist. And so how can you then start to change your mindset? So I don't know that I have a good anscer for your question.
I think that was actually a good, that was a good answer, because what you're trying to do is plant seeds for people to rethink, reframe your thinking. Here's some possible input for you. And the reason I brought that up, because there are times when we do advise people in ways just by our own bias and it doesn't work for them, I guess was really more where I was headed with things. And that just because I know that for me, if I hear people spending too much time in their history, I'm going to get impatient with that. And my advice may not be as caring, and so I think that your approach is definitely, well, you're a professional in it, but obviously it's more beneficial because it helps people work through their own struggle, think about different things in a different way. And I appreciate that for sure. You've, in my observation of your life and how, what you share socially, and knowing you a little bit here in this, and also some of the things you've talked about here, you would think that, you've done a good job getting the alcohol behind you. You've been a driven person your whole life. That's not really ever been, that's clearly you've been very driven in terms of what you've tried to accomplish. Sometimes when people put down the bottle or put that aside, they see life change. Like they maybe they aren't seeking as much. They may not need to have grandiose living, or they may just want to have just to let life settle down. But some of us are made differently, that we are driven and we still want to accomplish more. We're just able to do it more stable. You're at a stage right now where you're entering into kind of a scary stage for you, but you're in, entrepreneur mode, full blown, and probably, I think based on your own profession and what your goals are, you're heading into one of your more successful seasons in life in terms of what you will accomplish when you get through this. So do you want to share a little bit about the project you're working on right now?
I do. Yeah. And so I started out and said, this was the decade of impact. And, it really ties into, being the teacher and going back to that principle. And once you have uncovered something, it's like if you had the cure for cancer, you would want to share that with other people. You would want to help. And so, ever since after that 1 year of just focusing on myself, that's when I started writing books. That's when I started getting all, courses together and coaching and just doing a lot of different things in that capacity to help others. And I had this sort of aha moment, and it was, the intangibles, we'll call it happiness for, just for our conversation here, but like, what is happiness and how much does that cost? And how do you achieve it? And it sounds a little woo woo sometimes. And it's like, you can't wrap your hand around it. Right. But I could tell you that my phone costs $1,000. My cup of coffee costs $3. Like these things that I can put in my hand, I know how much they cost, but I can't tell you what this happiness is. And so I started thinking about how can I take a tangible thing and teach an intangible outcome? How can I maybe have a product and teach mindset? And so that's really where this idea kind of started. And so I've been building a brand. It's called Atta Cosmetics, ATA. And there's let me preface, some people may not ever understand or get that there's a mindset component, but to me, this was a very important piece of what I was building. So ATA Cosmetics, ATA, it actually stands for attitude, thoughts, and actions, which are the three things that we control. And so I'm patent pending on a makeup applicator, and it's actually made out of stone. So most, I will say, people, I know that male actors and some men put makeup on their face. I've spoken with some of them and they're excited to use my product. But when they apply makeup, they use sponges or brushes or their fingers. And so this is made with stone. And so I believe, it's going to be an industry disruptor. I believe it's going to be transformational in the area of makeup. And what I plan on doing is, coming out and doing, makeup and mindset, which is really funny. I'm not so much of a makeup person, but, just talk about mindset while I'm doing my makeup so that I can be out there on social media, so I can start to connect with people who really like this makeup area. And then I'm going to build out, and I've got a company that I'm working with, to build a whole bunch of skincare products that are all natural. And it's all about, what we do today impacts tomorrow. And it's all in, what we do to our bodies. There's the mind, body, soul, right? And so it's actually mind, body, soul, and skin. And if we can focus on those, I believe that's where we're going to be finding happiness. And so anyway, if you were going to ask somebody off the street, they would say it's a cosmetics brand. If you ask me, it's a cosmetics plus mindset brand. And it's really teaching a lot of the things that I have found to be instrumental in my life to get me to where I am. And I want to help others, and I want to help people elevate their confidence. My third book is called Confidence is Queen. And I think that so many people lack confidence. And that's probably one of the things I should have shared in terms of coaching, and what I see from people is that they lack confidence. And so part of me, I walk in at 6'1" and I have 4-inch heels, and that's all part of my branding. And I actually like it. I enjoy it when my back can handle it. But giving people that level of confidence to do, to be, to achieve, to accomplish the things that they want in their life. Wow. If you could just give a little more of that and sprinkle it on people, this world could look a lot different if they just felt empowered to do so. So that's what this next season is all about. And that'll be coming Q3 of this year. So yeah.
I love it. The only, as far as stone applicators, I've had plenty of people who want to throw stones at my face. I'm not sure I would actually need to use one right now, but as far as I love the concept, and I didn't know the detail of the concept. Because you're the founder, the successful brands have somebody that actually believes in the story of the product. It's not just, do you have one more product? It's the story behind it. And you obviously are passionate about the story behind it. I'm a fan. I want to see it do well. And it sounds like you're expanding it into more than just that applicator. Confidence, boy, that strikes home, I found that through experience. I mean, even coming in the show today, I have a lot of respect for who you are. I want this show to go well. It's always, you start off, you got to break through that veil. I find confidence has a lot to do with understanding the perspective of what you're dealing with. Once you get rolling, you're fine. But there's that thin veil of fear that you got to work through. I had a former co-host on another show that I did, Brian Yates, and him and I would talk about fear really just being a nothing thing. And a lot of times you just had to move through it. There's really only one way, and that's just to get through it. And recognize the reality of what you're dealing with. It's something just there that's probably the worst case scenario you're painting in your head to stop you. That's its only value, is to stop you. And so the confidence piece, I really appreciate that's something you're focusing on. For your goals, I mean, what are your goals with this program that you're working on? Do you have aspirational goals? Do you have, what are your short-term, long-term goals for this?
For ATA Cosmetics?
Yeah, for that season of your life and the messaging.
Yeah. Yeah. So my short-term goal is to get this up off the ground and just to get into, companies like, Sephora or Ulta, get into some of those big ones. But I plan on, I foresee this as $1 billion company. And I see that there's no reason why, we can't bring that forward into the world. And so that's the goal. That's short-term, long-term. And yeah. So I see a lot of big things coming.
I did not bait you with that question. And then I definitely did not bait you with that question because I knew you'd answer the same way. The last time I asked you what your goals were, you said it's going to be $1 billion company. I really believe it. This time you're saying it's $1 billion company. And now I believe it. I mean, I believe you, and I believe that was your goal but now you're syndicating it and making it part of the brand too. And not only is it, not everything has to be feel good. Yes, it feels great that you have this great mission and that type of thing too, but it's okay to be successful. It's okay to have a big number be part of what you're trying to accomplish there. And what it does, it shows other people they can do it too. They also have to recognize that you got a lot of stress on you and a lot of work that you're doing to get there too.
Yeah. And I know that people in the Christian community, and I'm part of that, I've heard pastors say this as well. And they've said, well, people don't think that we should make money and, that's worldly. Right. And my pastor is one of those who has done very well for himself and he's very open about his journey. And to me, it doesn't come down to money. I'm actually a minimalist. I live in I have a very small footprint and, I like a minimalistic lifestyle. It has nothing to do with that. It's about the impact that you can make. It is nice when you are able to invest in others. And a lot of times that is financial as well. You can invest your time, but if financial investments in the causes that you want to support, that says a lot. I think also, I want people to be like, I am a part of this brand and I want to be able to reach people. And if you are a larger brand, like if you look at Sarah Blakely, for example, she built Spanx, which is, I think a multi-billion-dollar business. And people know who she is because of what she has built. And if you look at her life and how she mothers and how she, just all these different pieces in her philanthropy and all of these, I mean, she's really quite an incredible woman. And so there's not just, the Wizard of Oz behind the curtain, right? Sometimes, which might happen when you have a smaller business, but you can be a little more forefront and be an example for others. And I truly believe that I was given the life that I was given to share with others. And so, I think helping women that are tall is one of my callings. And I have other ideas of how I can help in that space as well. And so a lot of those take financial, backing. And so, it's not so much the dollar figure. I just think that that's a really reasonable figure. And I think that what comes along with that, if you're going to use that for the good, I mean, it's amazing the impact that you can have on the world. So 100%, I believe it's possible.
And for me, it didn't make me think any differently when you use that number because nothing that I heard was materialistic about why you're doing this. That to me, that's a real barometer, of what's going on. And I think for you, it's really been about it's progress. You're a driven person. You were built a certain way. And that's not just to sit around. You're going to be driven. You're going to keep doing this project's going to be successful. And then you'll be on to another one that will be as well. We just don't sit still. Well, we've got to make sure that there's always something before us. So I applaud you on that one. We're getting a little short on time, but I wanted to make sure we talked about something really important to us that we've already addressed. I have 4 children. I'm concerned about what our kids are seeing in this world. And, I've had guests on here. I've had one who spent 38 years in California prisons for murder and another one that was sentenced to 40 years on a federal conspiracy charge. He got out in 20 because of compassionate release. I've had several other people, and I have my own pastor. If you go back in some of the old shows here, Craig Cooper was on here, and I was talking about some of the, some things going in current events. All of them, through all of their seasons, recognize kids need our help. And so the 2 individuals that I recognize had serious time, both of them are really trying to make sure that kids understand this is preventable and investing in their lives. You and I have talked a little bit about it. So, where for the young people, the young women coming up through, what advice do you think you would be able to offer to them if you were able to have somebody have invested in your life back then? You had a good home, but what other things could have helped?
Yeah. When I look back at that conversation that I shared with you, I actually remember thinking, there was this guy, this boy when I was 12, and I thought he's not going to like me if I'm tall and large. Right. And I wasn't large, but in my mind, maybe I was. But I'll tell you, and I'm going to be very honest about this, and this has just been on my heart a lot recently. I looked into so many different ways of how I could modify my body. And I thought I had heard, again, this is pre-internet days, but I thought I had heard about people maybe in Asia that were modifying their feet in some capacity for shoes. And I thought, surely there's some way to shave the bottom of my feet. And I will tell you this, and I will stand behind the statement that if I had not only been enabled, but also encouraged by adults, so enabled and encouraged, meaning that an adult would tell me, yes, your problems will go away if you do this. And here, I will do it for you. I will show you the doctor. If that had happened to me then, I would have done it, and I would have taken the best thing away from me. Because one of the things that makes Jen Sugermeyer is how incredibly unique I am. And when I walk into a room, you see that. And I tell other women how incredible it is, other tall women. I'm like, some people actually have to do something to stand out. We just walk in the room. It's like literally the easiest thing. And I wear heels because I like heels. They actually make me feel sexy, right? I can't, if I had $1, if I had a nickel for every time I heard, why do you wear heels? Why do you wear heels? Because it make me feel sexy. I like them. Why? You would never ask that for a short person. Why are you asking me? I like it. It looks, it's, it doesn't, why is this a thing? But this makes me who I am. And I get concerned because there are a lot of adults out there that are enabling and encouraging children to change their bodies. And that to me is very sad, because you are potentially taking away the thing that could be their greatest asset, or their ability to have children later, or whatever that may be. And so if I could go back and tell myself one thing, it would be that I was perfect the way that I was. I didn't need to go down the path of an eating disorder. I didn't need to think about shaving the bottom of my feet. The person that I was made was 1 in 8 billion. 1 in 8 billion people we have in this world. We are a snowflake. Why would you want to diminish that value? A Ferrari costs more than a Honda because there's less of them, and you are one. You are 1 in 8 billion. So that is what I would go and I would tell any child, is that whatever it is that you're going through, it's normal. It's normal to go through those things, and it's going to stabilize, and you are going to learn to love that at some point. And the quicker you do, the faster you're going to get to wherever it is that you want to get to in life. The more you lament on those issues, whatever we think, we become, right? If we focus on those things, and that becomes our reality. If you look at it, I mean, we've all been in relationships with people, right? Like maybe your wife, your husband, your girlfriend, your boyfriend, you're like, oh, he's so cute. Like when you first start dating, you're like, yeah, it was so cute. And then at some point you're like, I hate that thing about that person, right? And it's like the same thing, but it's how you choose to focus on it. So wherever you put your attention, that's going to grow. So just get a hobby. Don't focus on that thing. Learn to love it.
Yeah, it's almost become
that's
cliche.
What I would tell them.
I mean, that's actually powerful too. Is to, it's cliche. We talk about what you feed. Whatever you feed will grow. So if we're focusing on this negative aspect of us, and that's all we're talking about, and all we're dealing with, as we've already discussed in this interview, focusing on our history really doesn't give us a lot of energy to grow. I firmly believe it becomes my God. So my spiritual component is diluted the more I focus on what's wrong with me, because now I'm not looking at what's available to me.
Yeah. And I think, and I'll say this, it's like I watch YouTube, and YouTube has AI behind it. And so YouTube thinks it knows me and what I want to watch. And I feel like all I'm watching is the same two things, because that's all it's feeding me. So if you're out there and you hate the fact that you feel like you should be shorter, or you should be skinnier, or you should be a different gender, or whatever it is, and you start searching that's going to become your whole search. You have to change your search. This is in YouTube. This is in your mind. You have to change your search, and then you'll get a different outcome. Right.
The analogy I've used with people, and it resonated with me early on in my recovery. If I stay in this room, and I'm there, that whole building's on fire, I have one door. The studio I'm sitting right now has one door. my available options in this room to save myself from this fire are not many. And if this is the only room I'm looking in to save myself, I'm probably going to burn to death. As soon as I open that door, I now have another room with other doors and other options. And so the more that I continue to search for the options that are going to work for me, the better off I'm going to be. And that resonated with me early on. And I think it still holds true probably in my journey more so than I'm willing to admit as I think through things. So I'm a person that does like to try to keep moving forward the best I can. I appreciate your comments on kids. I think that they got a lot of pressure on them right now. They've come out of the COVID season. Isolation is a problem for all of us with mental health. I mean, their mental health has been destroyed. I just saw SAMHSA had a report out from 2022. It just was published recently. And the 12 to 18-year-old, I think was the range. There was, I forget, it was some ridiculous number. Well over 50% of them had some kind of a depressive event. And of those that did, 98% did not seek treatment. So they're having and those events, in many of the cases, caused impairment. So if you take children that already are social beings, you make them isolated, and the only thing they're getting is social media, which has an immediate gratification. And then you're isolating them many times in homes that are causing many of these challenges. Now they're outside of that. Now what do we do? And they need help. And I think as adults, and many of us that have lived through seasons of life that have been troubling at times and victory at other times, we do have an obligation to reinvest in them and help, kind of reset the course here of how we're looking at life in general. So we're about out of time here. I definitely wanted to get in more on the kid thing with you, but I think you got a lot to you. That's for sure. You're got plenty in your life that's very interesting, and I'm thankful that you came on the show. Is there anything in closing you want to leave my audience? Anything you want them to tune into, or?
It's those 7 words. I go back to those, and it's learning to love who you are. And when you have that connection with yourself, you are unstoppable. You can do anything. And, your life, Chris, I mean, is a testament. We are 1 in 8 billion, but we're also not all that unique. We are all human beings. We all are very similar, and anyone can get through anything. You have to put your mind to it. So that's what I would say.
No, I appreciate that. Investing in each other, being willing to take a minute here and there, even when you don't feel like it. There's so many days I just don't feel it. This is not a feeling thing. It's like I said, it's a contact sport. We got to keep moving forward. We'll get the progress we're looking for if we keep moving forward. To my audience, think about your mindset. Where are you at? How are you thinking today? Reframe that thinking. Make progress. If you feel like you're in a situation where you're really just not sure where your true north is, just make progress today. You don't have to make a week's worth of progress. Just for this 24 hours, set some goals, get through those goals, and then make that new decision again the next day until you get a season where you got some traction, you're feeling better about it. Make sure you're investing in others. And between now and the next time we talk, please stay out of trouble.